God rest him wherever he is. I know that his wife is working out some sort of an agreement now with the University of Texas.
For over 30 years, Linda Moulton Howe kept a secret about Antarctica that most people would never believe. She heard stories from pilots, scientists, and military personnel about strange structures, huge openings in the ice, and mysterious lights moving where no one should have been. All this time, she stayed silent, carrying the weight of what she knew. But now, she's finally speaking out, revealing details that could change everything we thought about the frozen continent. What exactly did she see beneath the ice? Stay with us to find out. Linda Moulton Howe's confession after 30 years. Linda Moulton Howe has spent most of her life chasing hard questions and strange mysteries. For 3 decades, she kept something deep and heavy inside, a secret that seemed unbelievable, yet she carried it every day like a quiet burden. Then finally, after all those years, she made a choice that surprised everyone. She spoke out. She shared what she says she saw connected to Antarctica, and the way she told the world was both bold and emotional. She didn't talk around it or hide behind hints. She simply opened up about a mystery she believes no one should keep to themselves anymore, not after all this time. For years, Antarctica was just a frozen, remote place to most people, miles of ice where hardly anyone lived, and where no ordinary human discovery seemed likely. But for Linda, it became something much bigger. Over the decades, she spoke with people who said they had seen strange things there, unusual events that didn't fit any normal explanation. Some of these accounts came from people with military experiences who had never intended to share their stories publicly. They had choices, fears, and warnings about what they said, and Linda listened. She gathered those pieces gently with patience and care, knowing that if there was truth hidden somewhere, it needed to be told when the time was right. The moment of confession, the moment she finally let the world hear her version of events, was not heavy with anger or dramatic flair. Instead, she spoke with a kind of quiet earnestness, like someone finally telling a truth she had carried too long. She explained that she had been asked, even forced, to stay silent for many years. Official pressures, agreements she felt bound by, and unspoken rules all kept her from revealing what so many others might have rushed to broadcast. She wasn't hiding for attention. She was holding back because she felt the weight of what she knew was too big and too sensitive for the world to casually absorb. What she described isn't simple, and that's part of why it took so long for her to talk. According to her, what was reported to her wasn't just about icy wind and snow, or penguins and drifting icebergs. It was about strange openings in the ice that should not have been there, large gaps that looked like they led deep down into the frozen earth. These were places that some people claimed they were told never to fly over or speak about. One retired naval officer even wrote to Linda saying his crew discovered a huge hole in the ice near a restricted area, something that didn't match any known scientific station or usual feature of the land. When they flew over it during a medical emergency, what they saw made them uneasy and afraid, and soon after they were warned in no uncertain terms not to mention it to anyone. There were accounts, too, of scientists in Antarctica who seemed changed by their experiences, people who returned from missions unable to talk, unable to explain what they had seen, and clearly shaken. All of this fed into a picture that was puzzling and emotional, filled with hushed voices and uneasy glances. For Linda, collecting these stories wasn't just about gathering rumors, it was about listening to people who felt they couldn't tell the truth until someone really asked to hear it. When she finally shared her conclusions, she didn't do so with loud condemnations or sweeping claims about the end of the world. Instead, she spoke gently but firmly about the importance of truth and curiosity. After 30 long years of holding back, she chose to tell what had been told to her, in the hope that people wouldn't look away or dismiss the stories without thoughtful listening. Her confession wasn't just a report, it was an invitation to wonder, to question, and to pay attention to what might lie hidden beneath the ice. Keep watching to find out the mystery, secret buried beneath the Antarctic ice. Even after all these years, Antarctica remains one of the loneliest and most mysterious places on Earth. Endless ice stretches farther than most people can imagine, and beneath that white silence, Linda Moulton Howe believes there are secrets that weren't meant for ordinary eyes. She spent decades piecing together stories from people who had been there, stories that sounded almost impossible at first. Yet as she listened, patterns began to emerge. The ice wasn't just cold and empty. It seemed to conceal something deliberate, something hidden by design. Those who ventured into the harsh environment often returned with strange experiences. Pilots, researchers, and military personnel alike spoke in whispers about openings and anomalies in the ice. Some described large depressions or gaps that should not have been there, deep cavities that looked carved rather than formed naturally. Others told of unusual structures far from any known research stations, structures that did not match maps or scientific records. To Linda, these accounts were not casual exaggerations. The people she interviewed were careful, often nervous, and they chose her because they trusted her to listen without judgment. One recurring theme in these stories was the sense of being watched. Several witnesses reported seeing objects or lights moving under the ice or above the horizon in ways that defied explanation. No ordinary vehicle or plane could move that way in such extreme weather, they insisted. Some even described seeing shapes that hinted at architecture, walls, domes, and entrances all under the frozen surface. These details were unsettling, and yet they were repeated consistently by different sources, which only strengthened Linda's curiosity and concern. She also noticed a strange pattern in how people behaved around certain areas. Those who stumbled across unusual findings were quickly redirected, warned, or sometimes even threatened to stay silent. Retired officers told her of being taken aside and instructed not to talk about what they saw during flights over restricted zones. Scientists and engineers, even the most dedicated explorers, returned home visibly shaken, with stories that hinted at something massive hidden beneath the ice but left unspoken. Over time, these experiences formed a shadowed map in Linda's mind, a mental outline of Antarctica's mysteries that no official map could reveal. What made all of this more compelling was the mix of emotions involved. Linda didn't encounter people eager to brag or exaggerate. Instead, they were often afraid, hesitant, or deeply troubled. Their hesitations told her that these weren't ordinary stories or mistaken observations. There was a weight to what they had seen, a sense of responsibility and fear intertwined. Listening to them, Linda felt the emotional pull herself, a combination of awe, concern, and the urge to understand what had been hidden for decades. Linda also became aware of a curious contradiction. Official science and public knowledge painted Antarctica as a place of pure ice, simple geography, and well-known research stations. Yet behind the closed doors of certain expeditions, the truth seemed far stranger. There were anomalies in satellite images, unusual patterns on the ice surface, and hints of structures or formations that didn't belong to nature. Some suggested ancient civilizations, others hinted at advanced technology concealed beneath layers of ice. For Linda, it didn't matter immediately what the explanation might be. What mattered was that the ice seemed to guard a secret that someone, somewhere, did not want revealed. All of these pieces gradually formed a narrative in Linda's mind. Antarctica was more than a remote continent. It was a puzzle box of history, science, and hidden knowledge. For 30 years, she had listened quietly, taking care not to misrepresent, exaggerate, or make claims she could not support. Each story, each witness, each subtle hint of something hidden was carefully considered. She understood that what she was piecing together was fragile. One wrong word could make people dismiss everything as fantasy. And yet, over time, the weight of all these accounts created an undeniable sense of reality. Beneath the ice, something extraordinary and unexplained was waiting. By sharing what she had learned, Linda did not claim to have all the answers. She simply offered the stories, the observations, and the experiences that had been entrusted to her over decades. Her role was to be a listener, a recorder, and eventually a storyteller. And now, after years of careful listening and reflection, she felt it was finally time for the world to hear what she had heard, to feel the weight of these frozen mysteries, and to wonder alongside her what might truly lie beneath the vast, white expanse of Antarctica. Keep watching to find out. What first caught her attention on the frozen continent? Antarctica has always been a land that feels untouched, a place so extreme that most people can barely imagine what it's like to walk its icy surface or fly over its endless white expanses. For Linda Moulton Howe, it was more than a distant, frozen wilderness. It became a landscape filled with questions, whispers, and strange phenomena that didn't fit the ordinary world. What first caught her attention wasn't a single event, but a series of observations, small at first, that gradually formed an unusual pattern she couldn't ignore. The first hints came from accounts of people who had been there on official missions, scientists, pilots, and even military personnel. Most of these witnesses were careful and hesitant, speaking in measured tones about the unexpected things they saw. Some mentioned unusual shapes under the ice, gaps in the terrain that didn't match any map or recorded research station. Others described light patterns and movements that seemed almost deliberate, as if someone or something was arranging them. These early stories seemed like fragments of a puzzle, confusing at first, but when Linda compared them, a picture began to emerge. A pattern that suggested the continent was hiding more than just snow and ice. One of the earliest and most striking accounts involved a retired pilot who had flown over a restricted section of Antarctica during a medical evacuation. According to his story, his plane passed over a huge depression in the ice, larger than anything he had expected to see naturally. The hole wasn't just a simple crevasse. It had a structure to it, almost like an entrance carved into the ice. The pilot described a strange unease among his crew, a feeling that they were not supposed to witness this sight. Afterward, they were warned in no uncertain terms never to discuss it publicly. For Linda, hearing such stories from people who had no reason to lie or exaggerate immediately sparked her curiosity. Then there were the satellite images and aerial photos she examined over time. Some of these images showed patterns that didn't align with normal ice formations. Circular depressions, geometric shapes, and repeated formations seemed too organized to be natural. When she cross-referenced these with eyewitness accounts, the alignment was uncanny. Multiple sources, pilots, engineers, and field researchers had independently noticed the same strange locations. These coincidences weren't small, they were impossible to ignore. Each anomaly reinforced the idea that Antarctica's surface might be a thin cover over something far more unusual. Linda also paid attention to the emotional tone of the people who shared their experiences. Many seemed haunted or conflicted, as though seeing these anomalies had left a mark on them. Scientists who returned from missions sometimes couldn't speak about what they had seen. Pilots and crew members hinted at being told not to share details, though they wanted to. Over time, Linda realized that fear and secrecy were as consistent a feature of the continent as the ice itself. It wasn't just what people saw, it was how those around them reacted, the rules imposed, the silent warnings. All of it suggested that something significant was being protected from public knowledge. Another element that caught her attention was the unusual behavior of certain research sites. Some stations seemed to operate under layers of secrecy, with personnel who were highly restricted in what they could say. Linda noticed reports that hinted at areas cordoned off for unexplained purposes, regions where equipment and technology were deployed, but whose functions were never disclosed. Even casual visitors were warned to stay clear, sometimes without reason, creating a sense of mystery that surrounded ordinary research activities. For someone dedicated to uncovering the truth, these gaps in knowledge were irresistible. Linda's fascination grew as she began to piece together timelines. Certain events, unusual sightings, strange formations, restricted zones seemed to cluster over specific periods. She began to see patterns, not in the ice itself, but in how the continent's mysteries revealed themselves. Repeated stories of unusual openings, anomalous structures, and unexplained light suggested more than coincidence. They hinted at a hidden history, a layer of reality under the frozen surface that few had permission to explore or discuss. Despite all this, Linda approached her research with caution. She didn't jump to conclusions or make wild claims. Instead, she listened, recorded, and analyzed. She compared testimonies, reviewed images, and followed every lead carefully. Each discovery was treated with respect, because she knew that in a place as extreme and secretive as Antarctica, misinformation could spread easily and discredit even the most credible accounts. What finally cemented her focus was the emotional consistency of those who had been close to the anomalies. Fear, awe, and hesitation weren't just coincidental reactions. They were signs that something profound, even life-altering, was being kept hidden. It was not just ice and snow. It was a landscape layered with mystery, guarded by both nature and human intervention. Linda realized that if these stories were accurate, Antarctica wasn't just a remote frozen desert. It was a place that held secrets that could challenge everything we thought we knew about the world. By the time she felt ready to speak publicly, Linda had compiled decades of evidence, dozens of testimonies, and countless observations. What first caught her attention had grown into a complex, almost living puzzle that she couldn't ignore. Her careful listening, persistent research, and dedication to truth finally led her to reveal what she had been holding for so long. And as she shared it with the world, she did so with the hope that others would see Antarctica not just as a distant, icy continent, but as a place that might hold mysteries beyond imagination, mysteries that she had been privileged enough to glimpse firsthand. A landscape that defied official records. Antarctica, to the outside world, is a place of ice, wind, and emptiness. Maps show glaciers, mountains, and research stations, all carefully recorded. But Linda Moulton Howe discovered a very different story. What she learned suggested that beneath the surface, the continent was hiding a landscape that no official record could fully explain. It was as if the maps we trusted were only half the story, leaving out parts that someone, somewhere, had deliberately kept secret. Her attention was drawn to anomalies, features in the ice that appeared in photographs, satellite images, and witness accounts, but had no explanation in scientific literature. Some areas showed geometric patterns, almost like shapes carved with intention. Circular depressions, straight lines, and structures partially visible through the snow didn't resemble natural formations. When multiple sources reported similar observations in the same locations, it became impossible for Linda to dismiss them as coincidence or error. Something unusual, something deliberate, was clearly under the ice. One particularly striking discovery came from a retired officer who had participated in a restricted expedition. He reported seeing a massive opening that didn't match any known research station or natural ice formation. The depression was smooth and symmetrical in some areas, as if it had been shaped rather than formed naturally. The surrounding ice appeared unusually clear, almost polished, unlike the jagged surfaces typical of glaciers. His description alone suggested that the continent had hidden structures that official records had never acknowledged. Linda treated this information carefully, knowing that credibility was essential, but the story fit with others she had collected over decades. Beyond physical formations, Linda noticed that Antarctica's landscape seemed to resist easy explanation in other ways. Certain regions were consistently avoided by flights or heavily restricted. Satellite images sometimes revealed odd disturbances in the ice, subtle changes that didn't match any known seasonal shifts. In combination with first-hand accounts, these details painted a picture of a continent that operated on two levels: the familiar surface world of snow and ice, and a hidden layer of features that most people would never see. What fascinated Linda most was how consistent the observations were. Different people, from different expeditions, over decades, described similar anomalies. Pilots reported strange shapes from the air. Scientists noticed unusual formations while surveying the terrain. Engineers spoke of gaps or cavities that had no official explanation. Even the weather seemed to behave strangely in some of these locations, with sudden winds, unusual cloud formations, or light patterns that didn't match normal atmospheric conditions. It was as if the ice itself was guarding secrets and only revealing them in fragments to those who paid close attention. Linda also realized that the secrecy surrounding these areas wasn't accidental. People were often warned not to approach certain zones, and many avoided even casual mentions of what they had seen. It created an eerie sense that Antarctica was not just a remote, frozen land, but a carefully protected domain, with rules enforced quietly and insistently. The combination of natural extremity and deliberate control made the continent one of the most enigmatic places on Earth. All of this challenged everything most people believed about Antarctica. The official maps, scientific surveys, and public knowledge told one story: but the hidden landscape suggested another world layered beneath ice, governed by mysteries and anomalies beyond ordinary understanding. Linda's work was not about proving extraordinary claims. It was about listening to credible witnesses, examining visual evidence, and noticing patterns that repeated over time. She approached every detail with patience, care, and respect, knowing that the truth could be as delicate as the ice itself. By piecing these fragments together, Linda revealed a version of Antarctica that defied expectations. It was a place where the ordinary blended with the extraordinary, where official records captured only part of the story, and where hidden features whispered secrets that might never be fully understood. Her discoveries weren't just about what could be seen on the surface. They were about what lay beneath a frozen world that, until now, most of humanity had never imagined. Stay with us. Military mysteries she was told to ignore. Linda Moulton Howe quickly realized that some of the most intriguing stories about Antarctica didn't come from scientists or explorers alone. They came from people who had served in the military, individuals who had been part of operations where secrecy wasn't just important, it was demanded. These accounts added a layer of intensity to the mystery because they were often delivered with hesitation, as if the speaker feared even sharing the truth could bring consequences. And yet, these were the stories that most captivated Linda because they hinted at something powerful hidden beneath the ice. One recurring theme was access. Several retired military personnel told her about areas they were strictly forbidden to fly over. Even trained pilots, accustomed to extreme conditions, were warned to stay clear. Some described flying missions where sudden, unexplained lights appeared on the ice, or large depressions and structures that didn't match any official maps. Their instructions were clear: observe nothing, report nothing, and never discuss it with anyone outside the chain of command. The secrecy was so tight that even minor mistakes in sharing information could lead to serious consequences. Despite these warnings, some of them confided in Linda. They trusted her because she listened without judgment, documenting their experiences with care. She heard about large cavities under the ice that seemed deliberately constructed, formations that hinted at entrances and corridors. Some witnesses described shapes that suggested technology or structures far beyond anything normally found in such remote regions. The emotional weight in their voices was palpable. They weren't bragging or trying to impress. They were recounting moments that had unsettled them, even haunted them. Linda also discovered that the secrecy extended beyond specific missions. Entire sectors of the continent were treated as no-go zones. Access was restricted for decades, with only carefully selected personnel allowed entry. Some witnesses recalled being transported in specialized vehicles, escorted by armed teams, and reminded repeatedly not to speak about what they saw. Others mentioned sudden changes in orders or last-minute reroutes, as if the powers in charge didn't want anyone to witness certain locations. The repetition of these accounts from multiple sources made it clear that something extraordinary was being deliberately concealed. Another striking element was the presence of unusual equipment and unexplained operations. Military personnel reported seeing devices they couldn't identify, structures that seemed advanced or out of place, and activities that didn't match any known research mission. These operations were sometimes described as highly controlled, with everything monitored closely. Linda noticed that the people who shared these stories were careful with their words, emphasizing what they saw without speculating. Yet the implications were undeniable. Antarctica held mysteries significant enough to warrant strict military oversight. Fear and respect often accompanied these accounts. Witnesses spoke of feeling watched or sensing an unseen presence in certain regions. Some mentioned strange lights moving under the ice or unusual phenomena that couldn't be explained by science. While many returned safely, the experiences left an emotional mark. Linda could feel their hesitation, the tension in their memories, and the way the stories seemed almost impossible to forget. It wasn't just the icy cold that made the continent intimidating. It was the combination of isolation, secrecy, and the unknown. Through it all, Linda's role was clear. She had to collect the information without judgment, preserving the details while respecting the witnesses' boundaries. Every story, every observation, every detail of restricted areas added layers to a picture that defied conventional understanding. She realized that the military's secrecy was not simply about hiding routine operations. It suggested a deeper, more extraordinary reality, one that had been carefully protected for decades. By the time Linda felt ready to share her findings, she had amassed years of testimonies, images, and corroborating details. The military accounts weren't the only source, but they were among the most compelling because of the combination of credibility, secrecy, and emotional weight. Her reporting didn't aim to provoke panic or make sweeping claims. It aimed to illuminate what people had actually witnessed, to show that Antarctica's hidden mysteries had been observed by trained professionals under strict control. Through careful listening and respectful documentation, Linda revealed a world that most of us could hardly imagine. Antarctica, in her account, was not just frozen ice and snow. It was a place with hidden structures, unexplained phenomena, and areas guarded with vigilance that suggested something extraordinary lay beneath. These military mysteries, long suppressed and ignored by the wider public, became a key part of her story. And by finally sharing them, she invited the world to wonder, to question, and to look beyond the surface of the ice, imagining a continent that holds secrets still waiting to be discovered. The stunning details that could change everything. After decades of listening, researching, and carefully piecing together fragments of information, Linda Moulton Howe finally revealed details that could reshape how the world sees Antarctica. These weren't vague hints or speculative ideas. They were observations and testimonies collected over 30 years from credible witnesses, people who had risked reprimand, embarrassment, or worse to share what they had seen. And what she uncovered was astonishing, even to those who had long followed her work. The first shocking detail was the sheer scale of the anomalies beneath the ice. Witnesses described enormous cavities, some large enough to house multiple structures, which defied any known natural processes. These weren't small crevices or ordinary ice formations. They were vast depressions, geometrically precise, often partially covered by snow, suggesting that they had been deliberately shaped or hidden. Pilots, scientists, and military personnel independently reported these features, and the consistency of their accounts made it difficult to dismiss them as imagination or error. Then came the reports of unusual structures and objects inside these depressions. Some witnesses spoke of walls, domes, and entrances, arranged in ways that suggested intelligence and design. Others noticed shapes that seemed to emit light or energy, moving in ways that couldn't be explained by normal physics. The combination of these formations and phenomena painted a picture of a hidden world beneath the ice, a world completely unknown to the public and carefully concealed for decades. Perhaps the most unsettling details involved the human reaction to these discoveries. Those who came close to seeing or documenting the anomalies often returned deeply affected. Some were clearly shaken, others hesitant to speak, and many carried the unspoken weight of what they had encountered. Military personnel reported being warned repeatedly. Scientists hinted at consequences for disclosing certain observations, and engineers recalled a constant, unspoken tension whenever they entered restricted zones. The secrecy wasn't just protocol, it suggested that whatever lay beneath Antarctica was considered extraordinarily sensitive. Another shocking aspect was the coordination of these hidden areas. Witnesses described patterns that implied organization, not randomness. Some depressions and structures seemed aligned in deliberate ways, as if the landscape itself had been carefully planned. Lights, movements, and even environmental changes in these zones didn't match known scientific or natural explanations. For Linda, these repeated patterns were key evidence that the continent harbored something far beyond ordinary comprehension. The emotional weight of these revelations cannot be overstated. Linda wasn't presenting rumors or speculative theories. She was relaying carefully documented observations from people who trusted her with the truth. Hearing their voices, their fear, and their awe made the discoveries feel immediate, personal, and human. Antarctica was no longer just a distant, icy wilderness. It had become a landscape filled with hidden structures, unexplained phenomena, and secrets deliberately shielded from view. Finally, the most profound detail was the implication itself. If these observations are accurate, they suggest that Antarctica may hold evidence of something entirely unknown to modern science or history. It's a hidden layer of our world protected by ice, secrecy, and time. The consequences of these revelations are enormous, not just for our understanding of the continent, but for our broader view of history, exploration, and the limits of human knowledge. Linda's revelation wasn't designed to shock without reason. It was an invitation to wonder, to question, and to think beyond the surface of what we are told. After 30 years of silence, she shared her findings not to provoke panic, but to awaken curiosity and encourage people to consider the unknown. The details she revealed, carefully collected and meticulously reported, suggest a world beneath the ice that challenges everything we thought we knew. And as viewers, we are left to imagine the possibilities, to feel the awe, and to wonder what else might lie hidden in the frozen continent, waiting for someone brave enough to discover it. So, what do you think about Linda Moulton Howe's revelation? Was her silence a choice for caution, or a burden she had to carry alone? Let her story remind us that some truths take time to be shared. Share your thoughts below and keep the mystery alive.